Malcolm James McCormick, also known as Mac Miller. The rapper was born January 19th, 1992, and hailed from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It's clearly evident that he was years better at his craft than his age signified, but don't make the mistake of thinking his skill fell from the sky. At the age of 5, Mac received an electric keyboard for Hanukkah and was hooked on music ever since. But who was Mac Miller before he was Mac Miller? Malcolm started rapping at the age of 14, and at 15, he started taking it seriously. He adopted the title Easy Mac, and in 2007, he released his first mixtape titled But My Mackin' Ain't Easy. And the fact that a 15-year-old was able to make this is astonishing beyond all measure.
They used to be here, life is but a dream, doesn't seem to be clear. Been meaning to write my thoughts down, jot down my mind, take the words I can't say and put them into rhymes. So I'm up all night on this beat up mic, convincing myself that I can't cheat on life. So Papa don't preach and Mama don't worry, nothing's gonna hurt me growing up in a hurry.
The lyrics, cadence, and instrumentals can only be described as prophetic of what was to come. By 2009, he had changed his alias to the one we all know today, Mac Miller. And in 2010, Mac won 21 and Under of the Year. In July of 2010, Mac was signed to Rostrum Records, which preceded the release of Kickin' Incredibly Dope Shit, or as it is more commonly known, Kids. This is the first full album you'll find on Spotify, and it is an unreal initial release under his new name. It also has one of my favorite album covers ever made. It's so good. I think something about Mac Miller that goes critically overlooked was his musical ability when it came to actually playing instruments. There's an assumption often made about rappers that the bulk of their musical ability lies in their ability to write lyrics and recite said lyrics. And while this could be true for some, or maybe even most, it certainly was not true for Mac.
Wait, Mac Miller right here. He about to get busy on the keys. I didn't even know he played the keys, so.
I've never done this before. I'm gonna see. I mean, I've watched people play the piano. I've never tried to see what happens.
After the release of Kids, Mac Miller started receiving the attention of other labels, but decided to stay with Rostrum Records because it was based in Pittsburgh. That meant that he could be close to his family, as well as stay in his home city. It's also been said that his relationship with another Pittsburgh rapper, Wiz Khalifa, was a strong motivator, stating that despite their different creative visions, they were still good friends. In March of 2011, Mac Miller released his album Best Day Ever, which in an interview with Hard Knock TV, he stated that he didn't consider the album to be a mixtape, and in fact, a free album with all original production. 3 months after the release of the album, he officially released one of the songs on the album as a single. His song Donald Trump was the first in his discography to chart on the US Billboard Hot 100, peaking at number 75 and earning him a platinum certification. This, of course, did not come without controversy, as things involving the name Donald Trump often do. Trump tweeted after the release of the single that he was going to teach Mac a big boy lesson about lawsuits and finance. And my personal favorite, which reads, "Little Mac Miller, I have more hair than you, and there's a slight age difference." You don't find poetry like that very much these days. That's a joke. I'm totally joking. I don't know what he was thinking when he wrote this. But then again, you kind of never do. When it comes to Twitter, he's always kind of regurgitating some whack shit. Later in the year, Mac released his debut studio album, Blue Slide Park. It was the first independently distributed debut album to go #1 on the Billboard 200 since 1995, and it did it the first week. This album attracted critics and fans alike, with many of the critics stating that it was nothing more than frat rap. Given the context of the lyrics and their fixation on drugs, alcohol, money, and women, that could very well be true. But I've listened to that album more than a few times, and I truthfully think it's something different. I think Kids better encapsulated frat rap, but Kids as a project was generally more upbeat. I think that Blue Slide Park was more honest, and it gave a fleeting glimpse at the habits and addictions that would eventually consume him. That's obviously my personal interpretation of the album, but I feel something different when I listen to it, even if it's hard to articulate.
Everybody wanna ask where I came from. Young kid who bang drums. Money, don't you worry, I'ma make some. Somebody changing the world, it only takes one. Never scared of death, but I ain't ready for that day to come. A million people in the world, I don't hate one. Even them dummies robbing people with some fake guns. Make mistakes, young boy, that's just what I heard. And you don't ever figure out what you don't want to first. I got another verse, invincible and nothing hurts. 100 words coming up with what'll have your bubble burst.
I've done more research for this video than any other project I've ever made. And I'm saying that so that you, the viewer, know how important it is to me that all of my facts are backed by legitimate testimonies and interviews. Also, during the writing of this video, I listened to every single Mac Miller album on Spotify at least once, as well as several other singles and mixtapes that weren't on Spotify. The idea was to feel the music based off of who he was when he released it. I've also watched a number of interviews, and it becomes more and more evident how much the words of the critics actually did affect him, and ultimately, it may have been what drew him closer to substance abuse, but we'll talk about that later. The comments stating that his music was frat rap caused a critical change in his musical style, which shortly thereafter bred Macadelic, a vital shift vocally, lyrically, and instrumentally. This wasn't frat rap. This was a dramatic revision of his entire creative process, featuring psychedelic audio elements and lyrics unlike anything he had written before. I like to think that Macadelic was kind of a pivotal point in his career. It was around this time that Mac Miller and the Most Dope Family started airing on TV, and I'm gonna be honest, I didn't even know this show existed until I was writing this video. It was a reality TV series following Mac and his crew, which included his bodyguard, his business partner, and some of his childhood friends while they were living in LA. I have to imagine this show was really cool when it aired. It follows a young man who has found more success and money than he knows what to do with. But watching it over a decade later doesn't leave the impression I think the producers were hoping for in 2013. It's honestly really sad to watch. Being that it's reality TV, it has to be safe and digestible enough for airtime. But it really just feels like glorification of a young man's horrible descent into disorientation. The cameras couldn't show the drug use or really any of the destructive parts of his creative process and lifestyle. That stuff isn't very good for ratings, I suppose. I have heard it said, or rather I've read, that Mac Miller quit his drug use in preparation for the show, but that doesn't mean that the other destructive habits went away with it. In some weird way, this show, I think, is a gift because it gives you a perspective on this person who you can really only enjoy through interviews and music. And I think it would actually be a really endearing era of his life if he was still here. On a more positive note, it was around this time that Mac Miller developed his pseudonym character, Larry Lovestein. Well, actually, the full artist name was Larry Lovestein and the Velvet Revival. Mac Miller developed this character as a separate project so that he could share his love for jazz music with a more romantic twist than what he had made previously.
Make me feel romantic. Let's run away, sail through the Atlantic. Two of us, such a wonderful pair, stuck inside this love affair.
I quite like this side of Mac. It's much more soft and mellow and kind of portrays a more romantic sound than what we've gotten to hear before. In June of 2013, Malcolm released his second studio album, Watching Movies with the Sound Off, and this album was a pretty big deal, debuting at number 3 of the Billboard 200 and featuring Tyler the Creator, Action Bronson, Earl Sweatshirt, and several others. This album received a lot of positive attention, especially considering the more mixed reviews of his previous music. Mac stated that the album was very introspective and personal, and continued by saying it was kind of like throwing everything out there and just seeing what happens. This album is excellent, and I have listened to it more times than I can count. It feels tangibly transitional. It starts off trippy and psychedelic with notes of some of his previous albums, but it ends much more emotionally, sadly, but almost triumphant at the same time. That might not be the best description, but my point remains, the first half of the album is very different than the second half, but somehow the album is still cohesive and functional. I think it's a very good listen. Mac Miller decided to leave Rostrum Records in January of 2014, and in May of the same year, he released another solo mixtape titled Faces. Faces was a generally well-received album. According to Wikipedia, Pitchfork's Craig Jenkins regarded it as his most consistently honest and personal work to date, and I have to say, it still might be. It is unapologetically and brutally honest about his previous drug use, as well as the drug use he had been perpetuating during the making of the album. Knowing that causes the album to sound completely different. You begin to realize that he wasn't inflating the nature of his behavior for better lyrics. I can only describe it as an extremely grim warning with noticeably better production. Most of the songs bleed into each other, which makes the whole listening experience feel both longer and shorter than it actually is, if that makes any sense. Mac himself commented later on the album, stating that his drug use was so extreme that he, quote, was not on planet Earth during the making of it. Unfortunately, I think it's a reflection of the ever-inflating balloon that is destined to pop. The final song on the album, Grand Finale, was meant to be the last song he ever made. It was made during a week of intense drug use and intense fear, and was designed to be a goodbye. And if I didn't previously describe how grim this album is, please let me reiterate, it's a horror, but it is an extremely thoughtful and well-made one. If you haven't before, you should listen to this album. I think it offers a very unique perspective on Mac Miller and on drug abuse in general. I didn't mention this before, but in 2013, Mac Miller founded Remember Music. It was an independent record label imprint designed for Pittsburgh artists, as well as the production of music from his other aliases, such as Larry Lovestein and the Velvet Revival and Larry Fisherman, which was the pseudonym he used for releasing his beats and instrumentals. The reason I'm mentioning it now is because in October of 2014, Mac signed a recording contract and a distribution deal for Remember Music with Warner Brothers Records, stating that of the labels he reviewed, Warner Brothers seemed to be the most independent thinking. Almost a year after he signed with Warner Brothers, he made his major label album debut with the release of Good AM, and it was becoming more and more evident that he was the people's choice in music at that time. Upon the release of Good AM, it found its way to number 4 on the Billboard 200, with the single Weekend having gone platinum 5 times since its release. That's 5 million equivalent copies sold, by the way. Mac Miller had a certain work ethic that would often cause him to release a top 5 Billboard album and immediately begin work on the next one. Mac began work on The Divine Feminine and released it almost exactly 1 year after Good AM. Just 2 days shy of the 1 year mark, actually. His focus for that project was more on love and relationships, and while that's not super far-fetched for some of his previous music, as well as his character, it was a really nice switch in tone.
I'll think of something to say, I always do. I'm in love with the way that you say my name every time it sound brand new. And you, always wondering what will be. I say we sound better than you or me. Baby, you could be my...
Lots of focus on the little details that really make you love someone, even if those minor details can be annoying at times. like when they leave cups everywhere, or when they get really comfortable in bed and then ask you to fill up their water bottle. This album touches on love, sex, and the journey two people take through life together. And I think it's a very well done ode to love and relationships. It's also accompanied by romantic jazz and R&B backtracks for Mac to rap over, but unlike a lot of his previous work, there's also a very healthy portion of singing in it. I think this album is extremely well-rounded while also maintaining focus on the subject of the album, which is love. Mac Miller would release his final album while still being alive in August of 2018. The title of the album is Swimming, and it's my favorite album of his. It might even be my favorite album of all time. I think this album signified a great deal of self-awareness about the guilt he had been harboring. It's a positive look at allowing yourself to heal even when, and maybe even especially when, those healing wounds are self-inflicted. It's really bittersweet, actually. I think that if he hadn't died the way that he did, he might have been able to stick around and fix things. And I would love to hear what he'd be making now, because he was getting better and better at such an alarming pace. I know he had so much more to give if he was only given the time. This album has elements of jazz, groove, R&B, and even a little bit of orchestra in there. It also has some really phenomenal bass lines. If this video makes you want to listen to a Mac Miller album for the first time, it should be this one. The last album I'm going to touch on in this video is Circles. Circles was released over a year after his death, and it's very clear that the public was still very much mourning the loss of Mac Miller. It debuted at number 3 of the Billboard 200. Circles was meant to be a complementing album to Swimming, and was released by his family with the help of John Bryan, who finished the production of Circles after Mac Miller's death and was a big part in the construction of Swimming as well. A post made to his Instagram by his family reads, "At the time of passing, Malcolm was well into the process of recording his companion album to Swimming, entitled Circles. 2 different styles complementing each other, completing a circle. Swimming in circles was the concept." And I think it does the job of complementing Swimming very, very well. On September 17th of 2018, and at just 26 years old, Mac was found dead in his home. He was sold fake oxycodone pills which were laced with fentanyl. I don't want to talk about his death because it's very much not the point of this video. I wanted to shed light on his career, his creative spirit, and his struggle with substance abuse and mental health, but also his wildly positive, funny, and charming personality that is abundantly obvious in almost every interview, picture, and video. I don't believe people like him are born very often, which makes his premature passing that much more tragic and heartbreaking. Drugs don't pick favorites. If you or someone you know is struggling, help is available. I've attached a link to a drug abuse charity, as well as one for the Mac Miller Fund, which helps underprivileged youth find creative resources. If in the off chance someone watches this video and they want to help, the links will be in the description. I think it's really, really tragic that he's gone. But instead of fixating on what I believe he would have been able to make if he was given the chance to stick around longer, I am instead choosing to be grateful that he was ever here. Because just being able to listen to and enjoy the music that he was able to make while he was here is nothing short of a great privilege. But anyway, if you like this video and you want to support the channel, you can go watch another one of my videos, or like, comment, subscribe, whatever. I'll put socials on the bottom, and I will see you next time I decide to upload.